ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وله الحمد في الآخرة وهو الحكيم الخبير. والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث إلى كافة الورى بشيرا ونذيرا وداعيا إلى الله بإذنه وسراجا منيرا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته أئمة الهدى ومصابيح الدجى الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله لا يغير ما بقوم حتى يغيروا ما بأنفسهم. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بالحسين عليه السلام. Strengthening one's connection with the living Imam, with Imam Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman, Ajjal Allah Ta'ala Farajuhu Sharif, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, is one of the wishes of a true muntadir, someone who is awaiting the reappearance of the 12th Holy Imam. Indeed, we can say it is his greatest wish. A muntadir, somebody who awaits the Imam, wishes to strengthen his connection with him constantly. And inshallah tonight we will be looking at some practical measures as to how we as the people who are waiting the Imam's reappearance can strengthen our connection with him. And you will note that I am saying strengthen our connection with him, not establish, because we already have a connection with the Imam. Indeed, not just us, but every single thing that exists in the universe has a connection with the Imam. This means that we are not talking about establishing from the start, just making it stronger so that we feel more connected to him. Let me explain this by pointing to that wonderful dua that we normally recite on Friday mornings, the dua al-Nudba. Dua al-Nudba tells us about this relationship between the Imam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all created things. Let's see the position of the Imam in Allah's created order. In this dua we read, أين السبب المتصل بين الأرض والسماء. What that means is, where is that sabab al-muttasil? Sabab al-muttasil means the means of connection. So we call out and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where is that means of connection between what and what? Between the created beings and the heavens, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is telling us that the Imam's position is such that he is like the link between everything that is created and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, there is already a connection, and it is all about just strengthening that connection. Now, when we say there is a link between everything that exists and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is really pointing to what we can call spiritual traffic. Since coming to California, I've heard no end of complaints about the traffic over here, right? But this is something which is a little bit different. It's all about spiritual traffic. Traffic between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and everything that is created. So what happens is, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to send down His grace, wants to send down His blessings to everything that is created, He goes through a channel. That channel is the Imam. So there is traffic, spiritual traffic coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala down to His creation. What about the other way? Is it a one-way street? Or is it a two-way, highway, freeway, whatever you want to call it? We call them motorways, right? Is it a two-way or is it a one-way process? It is a two-way process, because even when we want to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we go through the Imam. This is why we have tawassul. This is why we place the Imams as our intermediaries between us and Allah. When we want our du'as to be fulfilled, we seek our du'as, we seek from Allah by the right of the Imam. We go through the Imam. So it is a two-way spiritual traffic that is happening throughout the cosmos. When we are completely oblivious to this, we don't know what's happening, we can't see it happening, but those who are at a higher level of spirituality, certainly they can feel it happening. Now, do we have any other examples with regards to this? And how can we put forward some practical measures as to how we can strengthen this? Like I said, everybody has that connection, but it doesn't mean that connection with everyone is strong. For some people, it is like a really thick rope. It is something very, very solid, and the chain will never be broken at all. For others, it is just like a very thin thing. It is not strong. So how can we strengthen our connection? Through using, inshallah, the advices of the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now the first thing with regards to these practical measures is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He wants us to strengthen the connection we have with the Imam. It is no good just simply praying for his reappearance. We constantly pray for him to hasten and to reappear and to guide us and all the rest of it. But that is not enough, my brothers and sisters. We must be proactive and prepare the grounds for his reappearance. It is like this: we are waiting for the Imam, but Allah is waiting for us to be ready. So if we are not ready, the Imam will not be coming. Let me illustrate this by means of a verse of the Quran and then an example, a story which takes place in the life of one of the Imams. First of all, the verse. The verse is the same one that I recited at the beginning of this Majlis. It is in Surah Al-Ra'd, verse number 11, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. What that means is, indeed Allah does not change the lot, He does not change the fate, the destiny of a people unless and until they change themselves. So this tells us that Allah is not going to change anything unless we ourselves are prepared to change those things. We ourselves prepare the foundations for that change to take place. So now, when we talk about wanting the Imam to come, we must make sure we have established the groundworks for him to come. Otherwise, we are ready, but the Imam, Allah wants to send the Imam, but we are not ready to receive him. Now, as for that story from the life of the Imam, this takes place at the time of the 6th Imam, Imam Ja'far Sadiq, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. Indeed, it was a very similar situation to the one that we were just talking about, where people were not ready. Look how the Imam addresses this. So, at the time of the 6th Imam, one of his companions, Sahl ibn Hasan al-Khurasani, he comes to the Imam and he asks him this question about why he's not rising. And he says to him, "Oh Imam, what is preventing you from rising and taking your right?" And he says to him that indeed there are 100,000 people who are ready to fight in front of you with their swords. So what is stopping you? Look at the answer, look at what happens to this man in this story. So then the Imam, he just tells him to sit down. When he sits down, the Imam tells one of his servants to come and light the furnace. The furnace is lit, until the fire and the coal gets so hot, it becomes white. The coals become white hot. So now, the Imam says something to him which totally baffles him. It totally amazes him. He says to Sahal, "Oh Sahal, do one thing. You see this furnace that has just been lit? Go inside and sit down inside the furnace." Now Sahal, he's completely shocked at this, and he thinks that the Imam wants to punish him. He says, "Oh Imam, do not punish me. Pardon me from doing this." Then the Imam says to him, "Okay, I pardon you." At that time, one of the Imam's faithful companions, Harun al-Makki, comes in. Harun al-Makki has got his shoes in his hands. The Imam says to Harun al-Makki, "Harun, put your shoes down." He does so. He says, "Harun, sit inside that furnace." This is a true and authentic report. So what does Harun do? Without any hesitation whatsoever, he goes inside the furnace and he sits inside the furnace. Then the Imam, now I'm sure you can all imagine what Sahal's thinking. But the Imam just talks to Sahal about the affairs in Khurasan as if the Imam was there. He asks him and they have a chat about what's happening in Khurasan. Then after a while, the Imam says to Sahal, "Now get up and have a look inside the furnace." He gets up, he looks inside, he sees Harun sitting on his knees. Then Harun comes out, he says salam to the Imam and to Sahal, and the Imam says to him then, he says to him, "Oh Sahal, when you were talking about those 100,000 followers, how many followers like this do you have?" So the Sahal replies, he says, "Wallahi, not a single one." The Imam says, "Yes, Wallahi, you don't have a single one like this. If you have 5 like this, 5 followers like this, we will rise. And we know better when the time to rise is." So what is this telling us, my brothers and sisters? It's not that the Imam doesn't want to come. It's not that Allah doesn't want to send him. It is because one of the major factors is because people are not ready to receive the Imam, and they are not ready to take on that mission that the Imam will come with. Take it on and bring it to fruition. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So you see, my brothers and sisters, it is all about preparing ourselves, preparing the ground so that he can come. You know, it is like if we have a long distant relative living somewhere far away. If, for example, we don't have any connection with that relative, and then we see him tomorrow, he might be just walking right past us on the street. We are not going to connect with him. He might be our cousin, he might be an uncle, an auntie. We are not going to be able to connect with him. However, compare that to someone, a relative, who's living the other side of the world. And although we don't see him, we have never seen him in our lives, okay? But we have constant email communication with him, right? We maybe perhaps talk to him on the phone. We've never seen him, but then when he comes to our house, he comes to visit, we go to visit him, we meet each other, at least there's a connection there. At least there's some type of link and a connect. At least we don't have to start everything from the beginning. This is how it is with preparing the ground for the Imam and strengthening our relationship with him. Even though we don't see him, the idea being that when the Imam comes, we have already established a connection with him. We are not strangers. That's the key thing. With that relative who we never saw and we never had any contact with, we could go right past and not have anything, not know anything about him, not know what he likes, what he doesn't like, what makes him happy, what makes him sad, what he believes in, what his values are, what he loves, what he hates. We don't know anything. We have to start all from the beginning, but at least if we had some communication, even if it is in the form of email, then when we meet him, we can really relate to him. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So now let's look at these practical measures. As I've been trying during the course of these lectures, I've always tried my best to put forward practical tips as well as the theory, the verses, the stories and the traditions, because we need this practical guidance as well from the minbar to help us in our daily lives. So 5 practical measures that we can employ quite easily. There are much more, there are many more than 5, of course. I have just chosen 5 because these are mentioned very predominantly in our sources, and also because they are quite easy to do and because of lack of time. But of course these measures are not limited to just these 5. The first one is performing mustahab acts on behalf of the Imam. This is something that we can all do very easily by simply changing the niyyah, that we are performing this act on behalf of the Imam. Now, let's look into this a little bit more. One of the things that we can all do, for example, is give in the way of Allah. And as I have been seeing, alhamdulillah, during the course of these majalis, mashallah, the mu'mineen have been giving very freely and openly for these majalis, for this center, for indeed it is something very, very necessary. These programs cannot function without the mu'mineen giving for them, for their running. And therefore, please do donate generously, and inshallah you can make the niyyah of donating on behalf of the Imam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, when we say performing mustahab acts on behalf of the Imam, please remember one very important thing. And of course these are just reminders, you know, all of these things is just as a reminder for myself and for everyone. We cannot perform wajib acts on behalf of anyone else. Okay? Unless we have been appointed as a naib, for example, to perform hajj for someone and so on and so forth. Wajib acts, like for example our daily salah, the daily prayer, we cannot perform them on behalf of the Imam. It's wajib, it is for us. We must have the intention of performing it for ourselves, qurbatan ilallah, to attain proximity to Allah. But mustahab acts, that's different. They are recommended acts. We can make the niyyah of performing these acts on behalf of the Imam. We donate the thawab to the Imam or the Imams. So when we do this, what we are doing is we're establishing and strengthening our link with the Imam. We are bearing him in mind. We are sending the thawab to the Imam. Now, a question that is always asked is, what about me? What about number 1? Because we always look after number 1, right? If I donate all my thawab to the Imam, how about me? Won't I get any of the thawab back? I'm doing all of this and it's all going to someone else. What's the answer? The answer is we don't have to worry about that at all. In fact, not only do we partake in that thawab, but that thawab comes back to us multiplied many-fold. Let me give you a part of this wonderful dua that talks about this. There is a wonderful dua or a ziyarah which is known as the ziyarah jami'ah. Right? You've heard of this, I'm sure. It is a brilliant ziyarah. In fact, if anybody wants to learn more about imamah and imamology, as it's sometimes called, learning about our imams, their position, their function, even their position in the cosmos, as I was talking about earlier, the link that they have between us and Allah, one of the best places to refer to is ziyarah jami'ah. The background behind this ziyarah is as follows. There's a guy called Musa ibn Abdullah al-Nakh'i. He goes to our 10th holy Imam, Imam al-Hadi salawatullah wa salamu alayhi, Muhammad, who we also called Imam Ali al-Naqi, especially in the Indo-Pak cultures, other cultures, they more predominantly use the title Al-Hadi, the guide. So he comes to the Imam and he asks him this very specific question. He asks him, "Oh Imam, teach me a ziyarah that I can recite whenever I want to pay homage, I want to salute all of the Imams." So it is a non-specific ziyarah. That's why it's called ziyarah jami'ah, the comprehensive ziyarah. We can recite this ziyarah whenever we want to pay tribute to and do our salams and pay our respects to any of the Imams or all of the Imams. Okay? So in this ziyarah, what do we read? One of the things that we learn is this phrase that we recite when we refer to the Imams. We say, وَفَعْلُكُمُ الْخَيْرِ. That means your actions are goodness. Then we read, وَعَادَتُكُمُ الْإِحْسَانِ. Your adat means your habit. Your habit is ihsan. Meaning your very habit, it is beneficence, it is kindness. And then وَسَجِيَّتُكُمُ الْكَرَمِ. Allahu, what a beautiful phrase. Your sajiyya, it means your nature. Your nature is generosity. So we don't have to worry about it coming back to us and partaking in the thawab when we do mustahab acts on behalf of the Imams. We don't even have to ask them that, "Oh Imam, give me some of it back." Because it is in their very nature to be kind, to be good, to be generous. Automatically it will come back to us, it will come back to us multiplied many times over, and then we will see exactly how strong our relationship with the Imam becomes. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So now, when we perform these mustahab acts on behalf of the Imam, we must realize that it will come back to us and we will get a greater reward. Now, with regards to this, there are some other things that we need to say. First of all, when we perform these mustahab acts, we must make the niyyah of performing it on behalf of the Imam. So we can do any mustahab act, not wajib act. That has to be well established in our minds. It's not wajib acts at all. Now, when we get the thawab, it is something which is so great that it establishes this close connection between us and the Imam. And therefore, when we talk about this chain, the chain becomes stronger. And so, we are gradually preparing the grounds for the Imam. Now, let me move on to the second practical thing that we can do. The second practical thing that we can do is to recite the recommended supplications taught to us by the Imams. Now, of course, there are many du'as. Which du'as in particular? Well, I will just like to focus on one du'a which its very name implies a connection. That is the du'a known as du'a'ul ahad. Ahad means covenant. When you have a covenant, you have this type of contract, you have this type of binding between two sides. Du'a'ul ahad. Now this is mentioned in Mafatul Jinan, the work of Sheikh Abbas al-Qummi, and you can find it online, you can find it in books of du'a. Look at this du'a. It is said by the sixth Imam, Imam Jafar Sadiq sallallahu alayhi that anyone who recites this du'a on 40 mornings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make him one of the helpers of the Imam. On 40 mornings. Then the Imam goes on to say, and if that person happens to die before the Imam returns, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise him from the grave and He will enable him to help the Imam. Allahu Akbar. Thirdly, he says that for every word of this dua that the person recites, Allah will write for him 1,000 good deeds. And for every word that this person recites of this dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will erase for him 1,000 1,000 sins. So there is absolutely no excuse why we should not recite this dua on a regular basis, bearing in mind these great rewards. Now, of course, when we talk about rewards, one very important point to bear in mind is that is it simply reciting it just like that, just out of habit, reciting it and that's it, we will qualify for these rewards? It's not. With regards to all of these amazing rewards that we often hear in the traditions, we have to bear in mind these things have to be done with understanding. They have to be done with sincerity. And most importantly, those teachings, when you read the dua, inshallah, you will see the meanings. It's all about strengthening our allegiance. It's all about renewing our commitment to the Imam. The most important thing we must do to merit those rewards is to act upon what we learn in the dua. We have to act upon it. Then, just imagine, we read it with understanding, with sincerity. For 40 days, we are acting according to those teachings in the dua. What happens? What happens? We, in that period of 40 days, we increase in our spirituality, isn't it? We increase in our nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We strengthen our connection to the Imam. So no wonder Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide us with all those rewards. Being a helper of the Imam. Or if we die, He will raise us and make us a helper. He will account for us 1,000 good deeds for every word. And He will wipe away 1,000 sins for every word that we recite. Because now we have elevated ourselves through that practice of 40 days and 40 mornings. 40, of course, is a magic number in spiritual practices. When somebody does things on a 40 consecutive occasions, 40 consecutive days, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises him spiritually. Once we are raised spiritually, then of course we automatically merit those rewards. That's what is meant by reading it 40 consecutive mornings. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, there are two versions of this. One is known as the Dua al-Ahad, which is the longer version, and the other one is known as a ziyarah of the 12th Holy Imam. It's usually mentioned just before the dua itself. We can recite the shorter one as well. It is recommended to recite the shorter one every morning. Right, now, at the end of each version, whichever one we read, the longer one or the shorter one, there is a practice that we are recommended to do. What is this practice and what is the significance of it? If we read the shorter version, at the end, we are recommended to do something practically. And that is to take our right hand and to clasp it over our left. Okay? Now, I want to try to explain what these practices symbolize. All these practices, my brothers and sisters, they are not empty gestures. They're not meaningless. They are very powerful, symbolic gestures. As for the longer version, at the end we are recommended to do something else. We are recommended to take our right hand, to slap our right thigh 3 times, and every time we do so, we are recommended to say, Al-Ajala, Al-Ajala, Ya Mawlai, Ya Sahib al-Zaman, Ajalallahu ta'ala farajul sharif. That means, haste, haste, O my master, O the Imam of the time. So now, what are these symbolic gestures pointing to? Well, when we renew our allegiance, when we strengthen our bond with someone, what do? We give our hand in allegiance to that person, don't we? So when we do that in the shorter version at the end, it is symbolic of us giving our hand in allegiance to the Imam. And therefore, this practice helps us. When we just recite the words, that's at one level. That can have a particular type of influence and effect. When we do something practically, it reinforces those meanings. It reinforces the spirit and the feeling that's in the dua. How about in the longer version when we slap our thigh and we say that. What is that symbolizing? That, if you think about it, when we are anticipating someone's arrival, how are we? When we really truly love someone, your father, your mother, your brother, your sister, someone very close, they've been on a long journey, they've been away for a long time, you know they're coming in the next half an hour or so. How are you? What would you do? Like every other day, surely you would make sure that the house is nice and clean. Surely you would make sure you are really well presented. You would cook perhaps the best things that you possibly can. Perhaps get some presents, wherever it might be. Also, you would be in a state of anticipation, eager anticipation. This symbolizes that, oh Imam, we are truly your muntadhireen, we are truly those who are awaiting you, and we say al-ajala, al-ajala, the haste, haste, oh my master, oh Imam of the time. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So we can certainly recite this dua and other duas taught by the Imam. Now, let's move on and look at some other practical measures. So this was the second one. The first one being, we should perform some mustahab acts on behalf of the Imam. Secondly, recite du'as recommended by the Imam. Thirdly, simply remembering him. Now this seems very easy, but how often do we remember the Imam? Indeed, Ayatollah Muhammad Bahjat, who I've mentioned a few times during the course of these lectures, that great arif, that great spiritual master, faqih, philosopher, he puts it like this. He says that the Imams, they know our words, they have information about our actions, they have information about our feelings and our thoughts, but he says it is as if we don't realize, in particular with regards to the 12th Holy Imam, that they are present and they are watching us. Isn't that true sometimes? We know at the intellectual level that yes, they are watching us, and they are present, they have this connection between us and Allah. But how do we acknowledge that on a regular basis? Do we really feel that the Imam is watching us? So one way we can keep that memory alive of him being present, of him being watchful over us, of him being there, even guiding us, which we'll look at later, is to constantly remember him. Very simple things we can do. When we go to sleep, we can say a very quick salam to the Imam. When we wake up, a quick salam. What about after prayers? Again, we can recite the salam, the ziyarah, and we can remember the Imam once more. Also, on Fridays like we had today, there is a special ziyarah for the Imam. So we read in that ziyarah, وَهَذَا الْيَوْمُ الْجُمَعَةِ وَهُوَ يَوْمُكَ. We read that today, this is the day of Jum'ah, Friday, and it is your day. So all of these things that we are doing, we are constantly associating ourselves and making that connection stronger with the Imam. Another thing that we can do very easily, it takes no effort whatsoever, is to stand up when we hear that special title of the Imam. Another thing that we can do is to simply put our hand on our head when we hear his name. These are all ways to remember the Imam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Fourthly, we can certainly learn more about the Imam. There is no escaping proper study and learning about the Imam. His life, before his occultation, how was he, what was he doing, what was his life like, what were the circumstances like, during his occultation, after his reappearance, what will he do? What will happen to the world? What will happen to the government? And what will happen to the order that he will establish? All of these things. We need to learn about it. We can do so quite easily. Books, internet resources, lectures. There are so many resources now about the 12th Holy Imam. We can go and attend seminars. We can have structured, organized classes and courses. There are so many ways to learn about the Imam. Let me put it like this. If you, for example, let's take the field of agriculture, right? Farming. I don't know if anybody's interested in this or not, but if you do not learn about farming, if you don't know anything about farming, are you going to think about it? Are you going to remember it? Are you going to bother looking into it more and more? Of course not. It's the same thing with regards to the Imam. We can't expect to have a strong connection with the Imam if we don't know anything about him, his life, his occupation, what he will do when he comes back. So there's no escaping learning about the Imam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And finally, the fifth thing that we can do as a practical measure to strengthen our connection with the Imam is to follow the instructions and the guidance of the Maraji'. Why do I say that? The Maraji', of course, being those jurists who we all must refer to for matters of Islamic law. We must do taqleed of one marja'. So now, why do I say that? Let me quickly go through a very brief historical account of how this guidance took place in the hands of the Maraji'. At the time of the Holy Prophet, and at the time, let's start with the Holy Prophet, in whose hands was the responsibility of guiding the Ummah, the community? It was the Prophet himself. He was there, the messenger of Allah, no one better to guide the community than him. After him, then what? It was in the hands of the Imams. One after the other, they came, they guided the community, until it came to the 12th Holy Imam. So now, the 12th Holy Imam's life is in danger. He is the last Imam. So now he goes into Ghaiba as-Sughra, the minor occultation. Who is the connection between the Imam and the people at that time? It is those four special representatives that the Imam himself appointed to be that communication between the Imam and the people. One by one, each of these four representatives also pass away. So now what? Who has the responsibility to guide during Ghaibat al-Kubra, the major occultation? This responsibility is in the hands of the Maraji'. Therefore, we call the Maraji' the general representatives of the Imam, not specific. When we say specific representatives, we are referring to those four special representatives of the Imam during the minor occultation. During the major occultation, it is the Maraji'. In a general sense, because they have not been appointed specifically by the Imam himself. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay. So now, with regards to this general representation of Marja'iyya, the position of the Maraji'. Now, let's look at this. We must get our guidance from them. As millions of Muslims around the world always get their guidance from the Maraji'. So now, the Imam, he has a special connection. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Are you sure? If you're happy, then I'm happy. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So the Imam has a special connect with the Maraji'. How does this work? The Imam guides the Maraji' in his own special way. Let me give you some examples with regards to this. You've all heard of the great scholar Sheikh Mufid. Sheikh Mufid, like I was mentioning before, it's good to also be a little bit more acquainted during the course of these Majalis with our great scholars. Today let's look at Sheikh Mufid in some detail. He was the teacher of great scholars like Sheikh Tusi, like Sayyid al-Murtada, like Sharif al-Radi, the one who compiled Nahj Balagha.
Muhammad Muhammad.
So, Sheikh Mufid, this great scholar, let's see the connection that he has with the Holy Imam and how the Imam guides people like him and those who are close to the Imam, spiritual people, scholars, maraji'. There is this wonderful story just to illustrate the position of Sheikh Mufid. One day, Sheikh Mufid has a dream. And in this dream, he sees somebody coming to him. He recognizes that this lady is none other than the Holy Lady Fatima salawatullah wasallamu alayha. And with her are none other than Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. So when these three great personalities, they come to Sheikh Mufid in his dream, he's there teaching his students as usual. The Holy Lady sits down and she sends her two sons forward. And she addresses Sheikh Mufid in his dream and she says to the Sheikh, "Oh Sheikh, teach my sons fiqh." Alright, teach my sons fiqh. Sheikh Mufid wakes up and he is completely bewildered. What is the meaning of this dream? This great lady, the two great imams, all three ma'soom have come to me in my dream, and the great lady is telling me to teach her sons fiqh. So then he goes to his class as normal in the mosque and he begins to teach the students. When he begins to teach the students in the mosque, all of a sudden a lady approaches him. With that lady are two sayyids, her sons. This lady is a very respectful lady. Her name was Fatima bintul Hussein. She comes and she sits in that same spot that the Holy Lady Fatima sat in the dream of Sheikh Mufid. She sits down and she sends her two sons forward and she says to Sheikh Mufid, "Oh Sheikh, teach my two sons fiqh," just like the Holy Lady had said to him. So now Sheikh Mufid realizes that in the dream he was being told that train these two sayyids, these two sons of that lady. You know who these two were? Their names were none other than Sayyid Murtada Alam al-Huda, the great, one of the greatest scholars that the Shia have in their history. Great faqih, a jurist, usuli, in the principles of jurisprudence, a master, a theologian, one of them. He's the eldest brother. The other brother was Sayyid al-Radhi, the compiler of Nahjul Balagha. This is Sheikh Mufid. He sees Ma'sumeen in his dream, and the Ma'sumeen, they tell him, they give him guidance, and he trains scholars like that. So, Sheikh Mufid, he is well known to have these tawqi'at. You know what tawqi'at are? Tawqi'at are these written communications between the Imam and certain selected special people, such as Sheikh Mufid, pious people, people who have established a strong connection with the Imam. In one of the tawqi'at between the Imam, which is recorded in our books, and Sheikh Mufid, the Imam says to him, "Do not think that we are negligent of all of your concerns. Don't think that we are heedless of your concerns. And do not think that we are forgetful of remembering you. For if it was so, then difficulties would befall you and the enemies would destroy you." Allahu Akbar. It means the Imam is telling the Sheikh Mufid that we've got our eye on you. We are looking after you. Don't worry. If it wasn't the case, difficulties would befall you and the enemies would destroy you. Now, let me give you a practical, a real incident that takes place in the life of Sheikh Mufid. How he was guided by the Imam. How our maraji' benefit from this guidance even during the great and major occultation. One day, a man comes to Sheikh Mufid and he asks him this question. He says, "In my village, there is a lady, she's passed away. But in her womb, there is a fetus, a live fetus, okay? What is the ruling? Do we bury that lady with the fetus, both together, or do we perform surgery, take the fetus out, and then bury the lady herself? Sheikh Mufid, he says, you must bury them both together. So now, this man, he goes back to his village and he wants to tell people the news, that this is what Sheikh Mufid has said. As he's traveling on the way back to his village, all of a sudden, a horse rider gallops up to him at haste and tells him to stop. He tells that man that, you know what, Sheikh Mufid has changed his fatwa. You must perform surgery and take the fetus out and bury the woman by her. So now this is what happens, and that woman is buried herself, that baby is saved. When Sheikh Mufid hears about this, he looks into this fatwa. He realizes he made a mistake. He had actually made a mistake. Despite his greatness, at the end of the day, he is not infallible. He, just like all of us, we make mistakes. So, he realizes to himself that that person who rode up and told that person the correct fatwa could be none other than Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman Ajjallahu Ta'ala Farajul Sharif. And look at the sincerity of Sheikh Mufid. Because he was so disappointed with his mistake, he says, from now on, I'm not giving any more fatwas, that's it. Then there comes a tawqi, one of these written communications between the Imam and Sheikh Mufid. You know what it says in this communication? It says, oh Sheikh, it is upon you to give fatwas, and it is upon us to protect you from making mistakes. This is the position of our Maraji. This is the position of these great scholars. We should never feel that they are not being guided. We should never feel that we ourselves are not guided. We are always constantly in need of the guidance of the Imam. Indeed, the 12th Holy Imam himself says, he says, وَأَمَّا الْحَوَادِثُ الْوَاقِعَةِ. This is a famous quote from the 12th Holy Imam himself with regards to doing taqleed and following the marajih. He says, as for new issues that come up, فَارْجِعُوا فِيهَا إِلَى رُوَاتِ حَدِيثِنَا. For those new issues, refer to the transmitters and the reporters of our traditions, meaning the marajih, meaning the jurists. Refer to them for these new issues. Then he says, فَإِنَّهُمْ حُجَّةٌ عَلَيْكُمْ. For indeed, they are hujjah, they are authoritative upon you. وَأَنَا حُجَّةُ اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِمْ. They are the authority above you, meaning you people, the masses, all of us, we must refer to them for our guidance, and I am the hujjah of Allah. I am the authority of Allah over them. So we get our guidance from the marajih, and the Imam is the hujjah over them. As a summary, therefore, we saw that in fact it is all about strengthening the connection with the Imam, because the Imam already has a connection with all created things, between created things and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we can certainly strengthen our connection with the Imam by doing these 5 practical measures. By first of all doing mustahab acts on his behalf, by reciting the dua such as dua ahad, remembering him. We can also make sure that we are constantly following in the guidance of the marajih, that he blesses us all with the tawfiq to inshallah constantly strengthen our relationship with the 12th Holy Imam Ajjallahu Ta'ala Farajul Sharif. Sallallahu Muhammad wa Sallallahu alayhi ya Aba Abdullah. Sallallahu alayka ya ibna Rasulullah. Sallallahu alayka wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bi fina'ik. Alayka minni salamullahi abada ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز فوزا عظيما. Mu'mineen, it is the night of Ashura. Let's recall what was happening in the camp of Abu Abdullah on this night in the year 61 AH in the land of Karbala. It is reported that Umar ibn Sa'd actually wanted to attack the camp of Abu Abdullah on the 9th of Muharram. But Abu Abdullah, he sends Hazrat Abbas to Umar ibn Sa'd to request one more night. He sends him so that they can perform their prayers on this night, so that they can supplicate to Allah, so that they can seek forgiveness from Allah. In fact, it is reported that on this night, they were worshipping Allah so much that there was a particular noise coming from the camp of Abu Abdullah. The reporter says, "Dawiyun kadawiyin nahl." The sound resembled the humming of a bee because of their worship, because of their supplications, because of their seeking forgiveness from Allah. Inshallah, on this night of Ashura, my brothers and sisters, let's also follow in the example of the camp of Abu Abdullah and use this night to get closer to Allah. But then on the day of Ashura, Abu Abdullah finds himself all alone. All his companions have been slain. Muslim ibn Awsajah, where is he? Where is Zuhair ibn al-Qaid? Where is Hur? Where is Habib ibn Mudahir? They have all been killed for Abu Abdullah. And what about his family members? Where are his nephews, Aoud and Mohammed? They have been killed. Where is his nephew Qasim? He has been trampled under the horses. Where is his son Ali Akbar? He has been cut into pieces. Even the backbone of his support, Hazrat Abul Fazl Abbas, he is now lying on the banks of the Euphrates without any arms, with an arrow in his chest, with his head split open. Abu Abdullah is all by himself. At this stage, he can only do one thing, and that is to call out, Hal min dhabin yadhubu an harmi Rasulillah. Is there any defender who will defend the family of the Prophet of Allah? Hal min muwahidin yakhafullah fida. Is there any believer who will fear Allah regarding our rights? What is the response? Only the women and the children, they start crying, they start wailing when they hear Abu Abdullah say these words. But now Imam Hussein, he thinks that there is perhaps some other little helper for him. He goes to the camp, he goes to the door of the tent, he asks for his young son Ali Asghar. He asks for his son, he wants to say farewell to him. He knows it'll be the last time you'll see him. So he takes Ali Asghar from the camp, he takes him out. There are two reports here. One report says that just at that time Ali Asghar was martyred. But the other report says Imam Hussein took Ali Asghar in his arms. He took him in his arms. Ali Asghar now becomes the final soldier of Abu Abdullah. Ali Asghar becomes the youngest soldier for Imam Hussein. And as we were seeing it all the other night, all the soldiers had a battle cry. My brothers and sisters, Ali Asghar also had a battle cry, but his battle cry were his tears of thirst. Ali Asghar is crying, he's in the arms of Abu Abdullah. Imam Hussein, he presents him to the enemy soldiers. He says that if you do not have mercy on me, then have mercy on this innocent little baby. At that time, the arrow at the tender neck of Ali Asghar. My brothers and sisters, you know that in Arabic, when you want to say that an animal has been slaughtered, when you want to say an animal has been slaughtered, you use the word dhibah. The narrator uses the same word to describe what the arrow did to the neck of Ali Asghar. فَذَبَحَا It slaughtered him. And now Imam Hussein, he takes the blood of Ali Asghar in his hands, he throws up in the air. Not a single drop of it falls down onto the ground. Now how can Imam Hussein take Ali Asghar back to the camp? How can he show Ali Asghar's mother what's happened to the child? But he must take him back. He puts Ali Asghar on his chest. Ali Asghar's blood is running down the chest of Abu Abdullah. The women and the children, they're all crying. Imam Hussein now, he takes the scabbard of his sword. He takes the scabbard of his sword and he digs a little grave. Just imagine how small that grave must have been for Ali Asghar. But perhaps we can say Imam Hussein, he buries Ali Asghar there so that the women and the children don't have to see such a horrible sight. Perhaps he buried Ali Asghar there so that the horses wouldn't trample over the little body of Ali Asghar. And perhaps he buried Ali Asghar there so that nobody would have to see the small head of this infant being placed on top of a spear. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون اللهم إنا نسألك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الجل الأكرم يا الله 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 يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. Oh Allah, to the right of all the martyrs and captives of Karbala, we ask you to fulfill the following prayers on this night of Ashura. Oh Allah, forgive us and our forefathers for our sins. Oh Allah, bring relief to all those who are facing difficulty around the world. Oh Allah, enable us to strengthen our connection with the Imam. Oh Allah, enable us to put these practices into our daily lives, inshallah. Oh Allah, enable us to always live and die with the wilayah of the Ahlul Bayt. Oh Allah, accept our mourning for Abu Abdullah. Oh Allah, do not make this our last Muharram. Oh Allah, fulfill all of our legitimate wishes. And oh Allah, our last but not least prayer is that you hasten the appearance of the 12th Holy Imam, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajul Sharif. Allah.